Welcome everybody registered for this webinar, and especially to the attendees. Uh, this webinar is focused on the main changes that the American Psychological Association made to the well-known manual for formatting and publishing works, especially academic works. You may wonder, why should I know those changes if I can use a citation machine? Well, the answer is related to a daily life fact. How can you be sure that something is well done if you don't know what the state of being well done is? Hmm? You need to know that. Another point that many students wonder about is why they must cite works. Some of them say, oh, citing is so annoying. Well, this quote illustrates why we must do citing. And if you are not very interested in gratitude, I suggest you put yourself in the shoes of authors who are not acknowledged for their creation. You could be in that place very soon. I'm sure if you do that, you will never underestimate the importance of citing anymore. By the way, most of the examples presented in this webinar have been taken or adapted from the publication manual of the American Psychological Association, talking about citing and acknowledging. Welcome, Fardos, Jennifer, and Jordan. Today's agenda has only 3 points. A short one presenting general information about the APA referencing style, a section showing that what the main changes are, and finally one with things to remember. The whole presentation would be focused on presenting examples. It will be a visual one. Once again, the main goal is that you can recognize a well-cited occurrence of acknowledgement, or at least wonder if it is well done. Because if you can do that, you will change something, or at least look for the right way of doing something. That is absolutely important. Well, Hayden and David. David again? Oh, yeah. So let's talk in general terms about the APA referencing style to set up the context behind using it to cite academic works. And these are the points that I want you to know. First of all, APA style is a system based on providing author's name and date of publication. That's the main point. And you need to concentrate on in-text citations and reference links. Those 2 points are very, very important and are the things that you need to get acquainted with in order to do it well, or at least to recognize when something is well done. Second, you cite a source whenever you summarize, paraphrase, or quote information from it. So many students ask that question, when to cite a source. Yeah, whenever you summarize, paraphrase, or quote information from that source. In the third place, you should cite both sources that support your point of view and sources that challenge it. Because many students says, okay, what kind of sources should I cite? Only the ones that are are for my point of view and that I agree with them? No, because in your papers you are expected to include not only sources that support your view, but also those sources that challenge. When you do that, readers consider that you are being fair enough to at least they can try to understand your point of view. Then it is good to let the reader know that you are going to cite a source. So, because when you are reading something, the first um, idea that comes to your mind is that everything that is written in that paper is belongs to the mind of the author. So you need to tell readers, look, I'm going to cite another source. And you can do that using signal words and phrases. For example, verbs like argue, add, illustrate, suggest. So when you say, for instance, Smith et al. Suggest that this part is not is not created or has not been created by this author, but this person is using other sources. That keeps the readers on the right track to understand what you are writing. And then the main goal of the reference page is that readers can locate the sources cited in your paper easily and accurately. Because the idea is that if that reader agrees with you or disagrees with you, that person can easily go to the source and try and read it and say, okay, this author is on the right track. I don't agree with this author, but something. Okay? So there is something important to remember regarding reference list, and I'm going to say that again at the end of the webinar, is that the reference list includes only the sources cited in the paper. And all the cited sources must be in the reference list because it is not a bibliography. It is not it's not a list of the works that you have read. No, it's a list of the works that you cited in your paper. Okay? Hi, Jennifer. Okay, so now let's go into the main section of this webinar. I will present some of the changes that APA introduced in the 7th edition of the manual. Those that you need to recognize, that you need to be aware of so you can write or check citations correctly. I should say that these changes respond to the need of making the process of citing sources easier and more connected to today's context. And when you look at the changes, you will see that what is the reason behind those changes. In that sense, I will present only changes made to the chapters of this list because they are the most needed when you write academic papers. There are more chapters and there are other changes, but these are the ones that you have to be most aware of. Let's begin by the second chapter of the manual, which is focused on formatting aspects. And I will show two of them. The first change is in relation to the title page, which now have a specific guidelines for professionals and students. So if you are writing a paper in a professional position, you have some guidelines. If you are writing a paper in your student paper role, you have other guidelines. And as you can see, the student's paper have information about the course, about the structure, and no running head anymore. Let me show you examples. This is the example of a professional title page according to the 7th edition of the APA manual. Look at now the author can include a note to make something or to make readers aware of something important for them. And they continue using running head. And the page number is on the first page, of course. All the guidelines I will be talking about today depend or are valid in the terms that your university establishes. Okay? Because they will tell you what are the guidelines they want you to use. And if they want you to use APA 7th edition or 6th edition or the ones that they have created, are putting together different referencing styles. And this is an example of the student title page. And you see no running head, page number on the first page, and here you have the rest of the things that you need to include. This one is an interesting change in relation to formatting. Heading levels are very useful for an academic paper because they guide readers by means of establishing a hierarchy of importance among the different contents included. As you can see, the new hierarchy of levels is more consistent and less cumbersome in terms of the formatting. Now, they use title case heading in all the levels. Yes, yes, Jennifer. The left image is the 7th edition. The right one is the is the 6th edition on the left, the 7th on the right. And I'm going at the next slide present this with an example. Okay. What is the main change? That before you have to use uppercase and lowercase headings. Now, in all the levels, you use title case heading, which means that you capitalize the first letter of each word. And that is something that it was usually very annoying, which is in level 4, that you had to use a period, and you still have to use of periods, and but when it used to be in italics, and now you don't have to use italics for that. Let's see an example. Please look at this example and let me know um, if you have any question. Do you have any question in relation to that? No? Look at how clean the, the levels seems now. How clean they are. Okay, let's continue. The fourth chapter focuses on grammar points. And let's see what points. Well, the changes I want to present are related to the use of pronouns, which was expanded to reflect some psychological and sociological features of today's world. And I'm going to tell you what the changes are in relation to the use of pronouns. The first one, to avoid ambiguity when describing the work you did or when expressing your views, now you can use I instead of the before required third person. Okay? The previous versions of the manual require you to take a very neutral position in relation to who did what. Now, no, they say no, you have to use first a person whenever you talk about something that you did. And this is a huge change for some scholars. I can tell you that many supervisors and professors will not be too comfortable with this. But if they require APA reference style in the seventh edition, they have to accept the use of I. Okay, it is suggested that you do not use we to refer to people in general, which is called the editorial we. Yes, Sam, I think it's wonderful that because sometimes you created a kind of vacuum in relation to what you did. Now you can say that. Okay, so talking about the editorial we, don't use it to refer to the research team. Be specific. This is another one. I mean, it's not we did or we planned this research study. Who did that? For instance, the staff or the staff of this company planned this research study. Or Dr. Sam Peck created this test, or Dr. Adrian created these linguistic guidelines for this thing. Okay, or Dr. Annalie created this the way of presenting this. So the idea is that now you should make clear who did what in order to increase acknowledgement. See, there is a kind of intrinsic principles in relation to get better acknowledgement of work. Now, the third one is always use who for human beings and that for non-human animals or inanimate objects. Of course, this is an old grammatical rule, but It was not always followed when describing research. The allowed exception now is to use gender pronouns with an animal that has been named and its sex is known. So if you are working with a specific dog called Pete, then you can say he, but after identifying it. And finally, writers should always use the singular they to refer to a person who uses that pronoun as their preferred way of being mentioned. We are going to talk about this a little more when we see bias free language. And also, you can, as a writer, you can also use they as a singular pronoun when the gender is unknown or when you don't want to mention. You know that usually we used to use the masculine gender term, or we have to say he and she. Now we can say they. And here you have examples of the rules that I mentioned in this section. See? I develop, not another person. I as the researcher, I develop. And when you say we assessed children's metacognitive abilities, Jane Patrick, who is a psychologist, trained all the testers. And then you don't say we train all the testers. You acknowledge who did that. And look at the third one. Psychological researchers typically study decision making in a laboratory setting. Now it's incorrect to say we typically study decision making. And then the one that I told you that is a very old grammatical rule, but that has not always been used exactly in that way. The students who completed and the instructions that we include. You can say now the student that completed the test. And finally, each participant turned in their question, not his or hers. Or her. Okay, talking about the encouraged use of they, let's see the new guidelines about bias-free language. In this table, you can see 4 guidelines that were included to fill up the gaps in relation to bias language. If you look at what happened in the 6th edition, you will say that that part was not present at all. No mention, no any guidance. Now, on the 7th edition, there you have all the possibilities in relation to the singular use of they, gender, and noun pronoun usage, race, and ethnicity, especially talking about Latinos. Okay? And here you have some examples to make that clear. Interesting way of being not biased from the race or gender point of view. Now, it's time to present the changes in relation to format. You will see 2 slides with the main changes, and then after that, some examples. The topics presented in this slide focus on punctuation and formatting. Personally, I find the last one very appealing. Why? Because as an editor, I never understood why writers must use two spaces after each sentence. For me, it was disturbing, and even more disturbing when committee members focus on counting that. And then the students say, listen, I was told that I included two spaces. Come on, what does it what does it mean? I mean, and the the thing I put two spaces was kind of I don't say illogical. Now I'm happy. Let me tell you that now I'm happy because I think that we get to the logical one. Okay, and these changes focus on formatting lists. And now you can decide if you use period at the end or not. Spelling of technical terms. Now you know that you don't have to use a hyphen when you talk about, for instance, email, or that you have to capitalize internet. No, not anymore. Now you say email without hyphen, internet in lowercase, and what page together. Also, there is a guideline about how to use abbreviation in headings and what are the acceptable fonts. Before, you can only use Times New Roman unless the university decided another thing. Now, of course, the university has the last word, but you can use Calibri, Arial, Lucid Sans, a lot of them. And here you have some examples of the formatting things. Look at the last one in which the usual abbreviation is not used. However, you can use it, but what you cannot do it Okay, uh, I move into the handout. Can you look at it well? Can you hear me? Okay, okay. Because there was some feedback and I turned the microphone off, but um, okay. And I had to turn into the handout that I posted under the handouts tab because there was no possibility for me to change the presentation. Can you see the handouts well? Can you can you see the handout? Okay, so let's continue. We are finishing right now. Okay, so what I'm saying before is that regarding the chapter of tables and figures, I chose two main things. Two main things. The first one is that now table numbers must be in bold font, which is really consistent to the idea that previously the caption was in bold font, but not the table number. Now both things are on the bold font. And the change to figures is even more consistent because in the previous editions, the, the tables number and caption were above the table, but the one for the figures were below the figure. Now, both things are above. Let's see the examples so you can check. Here you have how it looks now. Now you have this board, the table number, and when you check the handout, you download the handout, um, and when the register receive their handout, you can see the different parts of the table. The real change is in the table number. That's the only one. But there you have a reminder of how it should look. And this is an example of how figures looks now. Now, the figure's number and the caption are above the figure, and the only thing that is below the figure is the note as it was before. But now both things are more consistent. Aha. It's time for in-text citation. Let's go into this one. Just three main changes. The use of et al. For any citation with three or more authors. Before was 5, and now it's 3. They include the other one is the inclusion of a timestamp when making in-text citations of our audiovisual works. Now you have to use the time in which that part is present in the original source. And the third one is the inclusion of the date of the original source. When you are citing a source, but you read only the secondary source, now you can include, or you should include, the date of the original source. For me, this one is very appropriate because sometimes readers miss more information about the original source, especially when the author had written many words. Now, before you cannot include, or to tell the truth, you didn't know where to put the date of the original source. Now you know because here you have examples. Okay. Now instead of saying Fisher, Smith, and Black, you say Fisher at all. Or this is one way of doing it in the in-text citation when you are talking about Fisher et al. Of 2021 suggests that, or um, there was a suggestion about this, and then you include Fisher et al. Between parentheses. Um, this one, this one refers to an interview, an oral interview, and you have to include the timestamp or in which that person say that specific things. And finally, this is the way that you now acknowledge the date of the original source. Ryan, 1961, comma, as cited in Fisher et al. And if the original date is unknown, in that way, in that case, you, of course, you cannot include it and you just say as cited in Nicholson South. Okay? Now, those are the main changes in relation to in-text citation. Now, let's talk about the reference list, which is not the same as a bibliography, and that you need to check thoroughly to be sure that all the sources cited are in and none uncited one is included. You may think that's easy with the citing feature of the writing software. As an editor, I have found hundreds or perhaps thousands of mistakes both in the inclusion and completeness of references. The main reason is that the software works with what you write. If garbage goes in, garbage goes out. So you need to be sure of writing complete references to include all the needed information. If your citation is not complete in terms of the information required, the reference list cannot be fit by the software because the software cannot go and look for who the hell published this. No. And I have done the completed information tasks so many times that I refer to myself as the citation detective. Give me an incomplete citation and I'll give you a complete one because I'm a citation detective. But you don't need me. You can, but it's not absolutely necessary. If you pay attention to this. This slide and the next one summarizes the main changes in relation to the reference list. Like I said before, the changes try to simplify your work. Well, perhaps the first one doesn't, but it is intended to fully acknowledge author's work. That's the only one that doesn't make your life easier, but it's the one that acknowledges all people of work. And here you have changes to site sources with DOI, the use of hyperlinks that the previous edition ruled as plain text. According to the previous edition, you cannot use the hyperlink in blue and underlined. You have to present it in plain text. Not anymore. Now you have the option to include it as a hyperlink. And there is another change, which is that the omission of the annoying phrases retrieve from or access from. You don't use that anymore. Okay? And you don't use that retrieve on this day from, no, not anymore. This is how things looks now. Okay? Uh, for instance, this one, the first one, corresponds to this one. Reference format when publisher and author are the same. That's the example of that. Now, this is the example. The second one is the example of the not inclusion of the location of the publisher. That was awful when you had to look for the exact location of that company during that specific date. Now you don't need that anymore. You just write down the publisher. And you can include now when you are using DOI, because the information has DOI, you don't need to write down DOI before, just the exact address to get that paper. Jennifer says, oh yes, that location was a beast to figure out. Absolutely, Jennifer. And finally, you can include the hyperlinks. You have the option. If you don't like them, you can use just plain text. But if you like it, go on. Now, you need to remember some basic things to recognize if a source, to be aware if a source is well cited or not. Let's see those tips. Here you have. This is a summary of what has been pointed out together with so far, but together with two other changes that relate to audiovisual material. The last two have not been pointed out before in this webinar, but I think that it's good for you to remember this. Now you don't have to use, when you are talking about ebooks, you don't have to include format, platform, or I read it in a Kindle or something. No, just the publisher. And when you are citing in the reference list material, audiovisual material, now you are encouraged to cite the main contributors to that work. For instance, the host last name and initial, or the episode title, or the narrator, or the producer. And if you are citing a podcast, the podcast name and the production company and the URL. So, once again, this edition is for acknowledging all the people who work hard to produce something. And to make it as as we can say is to make it easier for you. Annalyn says, I found APA 7 much simpler. It is much simpler, much simpler. And and also the third thing that this edition is intended to support is the bias-free language. In summary, it is created in order to reflect our times. And I have included here three things that you can print and keep on your desk. This is a summary of, of how to format the different levels of heading. So you can print it and say, okay, now I'm going to talk about the first uh, heading. It has to be in this one. And the text must begin as a new paragraph. But if I'm going to talk about something that is subordinated to that one, it's level 2, I have to put it flush on the left, bold, type case, and text begin as a new paragraph, and so on. So this is a very useful summary. And the next two ones are photos that I taken of my own publication manual that I think is good for you to have. This one, taken from that manual, is a summary of how to cite sources within the text in the both ways that you can do it, as a narrative way or as an extra information about that. This is another thing that you can print and put it there. And the last one is, it is taken also, it's a photo from the manual and is common reference at a glance. So an example of journal article, an example of newspaper, an example of author book, a chapter in an edited book, dictionary entry, government report, YouTube video, government webpage. So if you print these 3 pages and keep it near you, you won't have problems. I mean, you will make mistakes because nobody can do it perfectly. But if you give the software that you are using, you give good input, you will have good output. And when you review the output, you can recognize that everything is okay, or that you need to make to go to the manual and look for the exact one. Jennifer said, could you talk a little bit more about parenthetical and narrative citation? For example, when you might use one in your writing. That depends on your style and how you are writing. But the basic idea is that when you use the narrative citation, the focus of the sentence is the author of that citation. When you use the parenthetical citation, something like that, is when the focus of the text is the content of the citation rather than who said it. Okay? Is it clearer, Jennifer? And Annalyn says, there is just one thing I struggle with. Level 4 heading. I cannot figure out how to get Word to read it as a heading and then plain text. It wants to make the whole line either a heading or a text, not both. Well, that depends, my dear. Let me see if let me go to the one in which we talk about the headings level. Let me see. moving to give you a more precise example I can create right now. It was just the beginning. Here. Okay. Look. Uh, the title is Case Study of Factors Impacting a Grade School. And then you decided that you are going to discuss that. That's level 1 here. Level 2 is because you want to talk about the microsystem in which those factors exist, or from which those factors emerge. And one of the parts of that microsystem is the siblings. And then you have to talk about Brother John, Sister Emily, mother, I don't know, the siblings. Brother John, Sister Emily, and perhaps another sister or another brother. These things are not really having as such siblings. They are very specific. And since these things are very specific and they are in level 4, it is consistent to say Brother John, period. That means that now I'm going to talk about the things related to Brother John. And then Sister Element, period, and I'm going to talk about the things related to them. It's not like if Brother John is the same kind of heading that siblings. I don't know if you can see this. Jennifer said first, okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then you may need to set custom styles in order to get MS Word to properly recognize it. Yes, yes. And I have tried setting up in style, but not so size. You know that Microsoft Office has something that at the end reflects how not so easy are things created by Microsoft. Okay, I can be biased because of Apple things, but I don't find them so user friendly as it would. And Jennifer says, I work a lot in Google Docs, and I have done it in that program, okay? I'm not as familiar offhand with MS Word since I don't use it as much. You see? If you use Pages, perhaps you will find it easier too. And Annalise, I understand the headings, but it is the technical setup. Don't you think, Annalise, that it is consistent with the idea? I think that since they are level 4, the format or technical view of that level is it is informative, but it's not such important as to create a specific heaven for it that put all the highlights on it. Something. Well, at the end, it was created in that way, and you have to follow it. Any other question? Any other things? Do you find this material useful for you? Because not many people like this thing, so they really believe that they don't need to know about it. And I always insist that you cannot appreciate and use something that you don't really understand or know. Sam Peck says, Scrivener allows you to set these rules and formats yourself and provide an APA-style construct, which I am amending for APA 7. Although you have to pay for this software, it is one-time payment, not a yearly or monthly cost, with updates coming through for free. Good. It is good. But Sam, don't take all the things created by the software at face value. Check them, check them. Analyze it is perfect in APA, just Word is a pain. Yeah, I think so. But for me, the worst and more painful part of the Office suite is Excel. Annalise says, I like the fact that the word introduction is not used anymore. Okay, I will find it very useful. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm still here if you need to um, ask more questions. Okay? Thank you thank you everybody who registered for this webinar and the ones, especially the ones that attend today. And if you were registered for this Tuesday webinar, that we couldn't do it due to big market problems, it will be rescheduled. And I think that will be very useful for you, the poster presentation. Thank you very much.